everyone. My name is Sarah Avery, and I am the Executive Director of Quanta Change. Thank you so much for joining me today. So let's talk about trust. When I talk about trust, when I say that word, what comes to mind? Is it maybe you're thinking about people you really do trust? Maybe more likely you're thinking about people you don't trust. The emphasis is all kind of on the other person, right? You just have to find people who are trustworthy and keep them in your life. Is that right? Is that what it feels like trust is about? Well, today we're going to talk about trust from a really different angle than that, and about how you can really, little script malfunction there. So we're going to be talking about trust and how you can have more trust-based relationships in your life. And when I say that, what I really mean is relationships in which you know and feel that you matter, in which you feel safe. So I'm going to be talking a lot about those things, feeling like you matter and feeling that you're safe. And so stick a pin in that. But when you think about trust, are you thinking about how it's hard for you to find trustworthy people and keep them in your life? Maybe if you've been struggling with trust, maybe you're often finding yourself in situations, whether it's close relationships or distant relationships of some sort, maybe at work, maybe in family or friends or romantic relationships, in which you just really keep finding yourself in situations with untrustworthy people. Are you finding that this is a pattern? And when I talk about this, maybe the first thing that comes to mind are close relationships, but maybe you also have experiences like at work where you are constantly paired with somebody who just can't show up on time, doesn't meet their deadlines, and leaves you in the lurch for your own deadline, stuff like that. And you keep thinking, how am I here again? There's that pattern of, why do I always end up in this same situation? Are you even questioning your ability to discern whether someone's trustworthy or not, whether you're going to be safe in a relationship with them or not? Has it always been that way, or are you noticing this more recently? Maybe you're just becoming aware of it, or maybe it seems like it's getting worse. So are you thinking, well, wait a second. I realize now, thinking back, I've always been in the same pattern of relationship often, where I actually can't trust someone to have my best interests at heart, even though maybe they're saying that they do. Or are you the kind of person who says, I can't trust anyone. That's just the way it is. Trust no one and act accordingly. Set up boundaries to try and keep myself safe, or push people away, or retreat from people in order to keep myself safe, to make sure that I am safe, that the only thing I can do is remove myself or create a barrier to untrustworthy people. Have you worked on this? Have you done therapy or some kind of self-help work? Maybe you've worked on looking for red flags, noticing what they are. Maybe you've been working on trusting your intuition more, really listening to your gut and acting on that. Maybe you've really said, you've promised to yourself, I'm going to act in my own best interest the first time I see any sign that someone is being untrustworthy. Or maybe on the opposite end of things, have you worked on allowing yourself to be more vulnerable with other people, allowing yourself to open up a bit more and find out if you can trust someone instead of just automatically putting up a barrier? Okay, so has that worked? Are you feeling more confident in your ability to know who you can trust and the ability to act on that accordingly, and you're finding yourself in better, more functional relationships as a result? If so, that's fantastic. If not, you're not alone. It's not your fault. If you're finding that this pattern is continuing or getting worse, despite whatever work you've done, This is because the methods you've been trying have not really been able to get at the root of your trust issues, and that's something called learned distress. So learned distress is the Quanta Change term for the feeling that there's something wrong with you being just the way that you are. You absorb this very early in life from the people around you, how they felt about being themselves, not what they said or what they did, but really about how they felt about being themselves. And as you were absorbing learned distress, your brain was developing a survival mechanism to allow you to cope with, control, manage this feeling that there's something wrong with you. And it also allowed you to fit really well with your parents and other early caregivers, sort of like being a puzzle piece that fit with their puzzle piece. So there are 6 main patterns of learned distress plus survival mechanism together. And at the end of this video, I'm going to tell you what they are and how you can find out for free which one of those patterns you have. But for right now, let's talk about the learned distress root of trust issues. It is the biggest piece of learned distress that any of us have, all 8 billion of us on the planet. Our biggest piece of learned distress is this feeling that we don't matter. And that means we don't matter just for being ourselves. And a big facet for all of us in some way of the feeling that we don't matter is the feeling that we are not safe just being ourselves. So does that resonate for you when I say I don't matter or I'm not safe? Does that start to ring a bell? Okay, so let's talk about how that is the root of trust issues. So your sense of self is like a container that stores how you feel about being yourself, good or bad. So it contains your learned distress, it contains your survival mechanism for dealing with learned distress, and it contains your core natural well-being. This is the feeling at your center that you are just great being yourself, that you really do matter just for being yourself, that you are completely safe, that you have everything you need. So your sense of self, one of its jobs is to automatically generate all of the situations and conditions and relationships and interactions going on in your life on a moment-to-moment basis. It's automatically generating that from what's stored, the feeling that's stored in your sense of self. So when we're just thinking right now about learned distress, your sense of self is pulling up that feeling that you don't matter or that you're not safe, and it's using that to automatically generate relationships and interactions in which you feel that same way. See, I'm not safe. See, I don't matter here. They don't have my best interest at heart. And it happened again and again and again. Does that make sense? Does that start to make some sense of the pattern of that happening in your life? Yeah. So what I'm saying, and so let me say this, the survival mechanism gives us a way to try and cope with or control learned distress, right? So either we end up in a situation, well, let me say this, whichever version of the survival mechanism you have, it turns off our radar for knowing and feeling whether someone is going to act in our best interests or not. It turns off that radar. It says, no, you can't trust that. We're going to shut that down. You're going to just have to act accordingly. And so some of us have the survival mechanism that says, trust everyone, take everyone at face value. They must be good. Everyone is good. And then you find yourself working like crazy to make it seem like that's true. Does that ring a bell? Are you continually working in relationships? Maybe going back to that work relationship, maybe you think, okay, if I work hard enough, they can be trustworthy. If I send them a reminder email on Wednesday morning, they will hit that Wednesday 3 p.m. deadline. And then again and again, Wednesday after Wednesday, you're sitting there at 3 p.m. fuming because you feel again like you don't matter because they didn't hit the deadline. Am I right? Does that make sense? Or maybe it's one more time somebody forgot your anniversary or something like that. It's a much bigger, or even that you're finding yourself in a relationship in which you truly don't feel safe. You feel in danger, again, at the highest level of learned distress intensity. And so you might be that type. You might be the type who says, the radar's turned off. You say, I can't sense whether they're good for me or not. So I'm going to trust no one, and I'm going to create strong barriers. I'm going to create strong boundaries, or I'm going to just push everybody out, or I'm going to retreat. You can even be someone who retreats in a long-term marriage. I have seen more than once someone who their form of that retreating to keep themselves safe is to really not even have any sense of how they feel themselves. And so they don't have anything to share in terms of opening up. There's no opening up because the way their survival mechanism keeps themselves safe is to just not feel their feelings. So there's nothing to share. So that's another way that trust issues, this trust issue of I don't matter, can cause you to protect yourself in a relationship. So now, having said all of that, well, let me just say this. So all of this is to say that what you trust or not, we always think I trust another person or I don't trust another person. What you're actually trusting or not is your sense of self to bring about situations and interactions and relationships in which you matter or not. So you either trust your sense of self to do that for you, or you say, yeah, that's never going to happen. So let me say that one more time again. What you trust or mistrust is not another person. What you trust or mistrust is your sense of self to bring about or carry you into situations in which you are safe and in which you matter. Okay, let me say one more thing here in general. I really want to acknowledge that other people act in ways that are not in keeping with our best interest. They can act in neglectful ways, incredibly harmful ways. They're acting out of their learned distress, but nothing I'm saying today negates the fact that that's true, that they may need to be held accountable. You may need to hold them responsible for that because they're absolutely responsible. Everyone is responsible for their own bad behavior. So you may, in any given instance in your life, need to hold someone responsible in some way, maybe some very big way, for their action towards you that has broken your trust. So that is absolutely true. And if you are on top of that, in addition to that, if you are seeing a pattern in which you keep ending up in these same kinds of relationships, no matter what kind they are, in which you can't trust someone, in which people are acting in a way that is not in your interest, and you haven't been able to change that, that really points to your learned distress being the generating force behind that pattern. And your learned distress is something you can do something about. So let's talk about how that is. So first, let's think, why is it, if you've done a lot of work on trust issues, why is it that you're feeling the same way? Why are you still ending up in these same kinds of relationships? Well, that's because of something I call the rational brain roadblock. So the rational brain roadblock is a phenomenon by which, when your rational brain is operating, there is a wall of resistance to change, or a wall of protection around your sense of self, that part of you that stores how you feel. It says, this is how I survive, and you are not touching it. So that's to say that you can't think your way out of your learned distress and your survival mechanism. But the great news is that Quanta Change, this work that I've been doing for 22 years, was actually developed just for the purpose of getting through the rational brain roadblock. Very briefly, it does that by working with your brain during sleep. And that's for two reasons. Number one, sleep is when your rational brain is entirely shut down. And so when it's shut down, that wall of protection around your sense of self is deactivated. So it allows us to get into your sense of self, that part of you that stores how you feel about being yourself. It allows us to get into that learned distress reservoir and peel out layers of it permanently. The other reason for sleep is that that is when your sense of self is getting recharged. Every night when you go to sleep, your storage bank for how you feel about being yourself is getting recharged with how you felt during the day you just lived, either good or bad. And so what Quanta Change does, it allows you to tell your sleeping brain that you want to recharge not with learned distress anymore, but you want to recharge with your core natural well-being. And as you recharge with that core feeling that you are just great, that you do matter, that you are safe, that you have everything you need, then that peels off layers of learned distress permanently. And as that happens, sorry about the camera malfunction, folks. That means that your sense of, or your core well-being expands to take the place that learned distress was sitting, and you feel better, and your life starts to work better, and that includes your relationships. So you feel more and more of the feeling that you do matter, that inherently the way life is for you is to be safe and to have everything you need. So here are some ways that I see that happening for folks in this realm of trust. The first thing is that your radar for being able to sense whether a situation is good for you or not, a person is good for you or not, if they're going to be acting out of their well-being or their learned distress around you, your radar, it comes from your well-being. And the more well-being you have, the more radar you have for whether this is a good situation for you or not. The next thing is that if you're the kind of person who's taken everybody at face value and just said, run into situations and said, of course I trust this person, of course they're fine, you feel like you have a little space. You say, wait a second, I can stop, I can evaluate, I can get to know them a bit, I can decide, is this a person I'm actually safe with and I want to move forward with or not? So it gives you that space, the radar turns on, and it gives you the space for deciding or not. And to be able to say sometimes, yeah, this isn't for me. Or this person is I'm really, really safe and this is a good person for me. Or if you're the kind of person who has trusted no one, you also have the radar turn on, number one. And number two, you get some space to decide before you push that person out or shut down and get out of there or put up a bunch of walls around yourself. You get some space to decide, hey, wait a second. Is this somebody I want to let in? Maybe this is somebody I could let in, but I have some space before I have to decide, and I can do that on a gradual basis and just see. And then the last thing I see really in this realm is that one of two things happens. Either the people around you, their behavior changes toward you. The more you're coming from a place of well-being, the more well-being and feeling that you matter is emanating from you, the more they respond to that. And they say, you do matter. People who you've known for a long time, their behavior towards you might change. I see that all the time. Or new people come into your life, people who really have more capacity to respond to you from their well-being than their learned distress. And so all of those things I've seen a lot over the past 22 years. I've seen them for myself. I've seen them for lots of clients. But let me give you a couple of specific examples. So my first example is one of my clients who is in that, just carte blanche, trust everyone, and then work really hard to make relationships work kind of person. And then she also had this pattern of finding out later, oh, wait a second, that person really wasn't trustworthy. And in fact, they were using me for their own purposes and they weren't good for me at all. Can you relate to this? Is this something where you've just kind of gotten slammed at a certain point in many relationships over time where you thought, this is safe for me, this is good for me, I'm good here. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh no, this is another one where I am not safe at all. This person has none of my best interests at heart. And it's a surprise, it's a shock when that happens. That's because you're in this type where you've just gone in with no radar and assumed you can trust everyone and tried to make that work. And it hasn't worked because you can't make someone else into something that they're not. And you can't cover over your learned distress. That's the main point there. So if you can relate to this, I'm so sorry. I know what that feels like. But this client had unlearned quite a lot of learned distress, and she started to find that relationships that were either existing, some friendships she was finding were shifting in interesting ways, or she could say goodbye to friendships that really weren't. That she realized, wait a second, we don't really have much trust here, and I don't have to stay in this. I don't have to try and make this work. And then she found lots of new folks in her life, whether it was in friendships or business relationships, that were really different for her, where she could do that thing where she could take some space, say, I'm going to check this person out. I'm going to see what they're like. I'm going to take this gradually and see how this works out. And then she was finding, wait a second, this person totally has my best interest at heart. And in fact, this particular interaction, whether it was something about like her house or her finances or whatever in her life, this is one of the best business relationships I've ever had in my life. And it's really working out in a way that works for me. And so she started to feel more and more comfortable going into new situations with new people, because she knew that she could trust her well-being to be there, to give her the radar for people, and then find relationships, develop relationships for her that were actually good for her. And then my second example is someone who was like the trust no one person. Just, there is no one out there who's trustworthy. Put up walls immediately, push people out, keep people away, because that is the only way I can keep myself safe. Now, let me point out that the first example and this example, these two clients had very similar childhood trauma that brought about these responses. If I told you the details, you'd say, wow, that's really similar. Both cases, their parents acted in ways that were not at all bringing about their safety, really ignoring their safety, possibly, or they were putting them in very dangerous situations. One went the trust everyone route and make it work. One went the trust no one route. And that's just our survival mechanism chooses that for us before we have any choice in the matter. So back to my example of the trust no one person. So if you can relate to this, totally understand you're in good company. There are lots of folks out there like this. And so this client started to unlearn, and she started to find that she could relax and just be more herself with people. She found herself in work relationships having kind of enjoyable interactions with people instead of this super knee-jerk irritation with people popping up and causing her to push them away. She was like, oh, that person's kind of fun. And she said one day to me, I think I have friends at work. I've never had work friends before, Sarah. That's not what I do. That's crazy. And she started to feel just more and more comfortable being herself. And she said she felt like she had space to decide. She felt like she didn't have to make an immediate decision, either pull this person closer, more likely for her, push this person out, push everybody out. She felt like she had some space to decide, okay, I'll let them a little bit closer and see how they are. Are they good for me? Are they safe for me? I get to decide, and I'm safe. My sense of self keeps me safe while I'm deciding that. So, real change is possible here. So if this sounds intriguing to you, the first thing to do to find out if Quanta Change might help you in these same kinds of ways is to find out which one of these 6 patterns of learned distress and survival mechanism you have. So these 6 are called the idealist, the perfectionist, the optimist, the caregiver, the defeatist, and the dictator, or sometimes I call that one benevolent dictator. So finding out which one of these patterns you have is not just another way to figure out better ways to control or cope with learned distress. It's not finding out, just examining how you've been and how you can kind of work with that pattern. Maybe some methods out there give you ways to work with what's there. Nope. That's not what this is about at all. What Quanta Change is about is peeling off layers of learned distress permanently. So when you get your pattern of learned distress, what you're going to be finding out is what you're going to be getting rid of, to uncover your core well-being, that part of you that says, I am great being myself. I do matter just for being myself. I can be safe. I can have what I need. I can get my needs met. So the way that you find out which one of these patterns you have is you're going to go to my website and fill out a free in-depth personality tool that is scientifically validated to measure learned distress. And I'm going to send you a free report that from your graphed answers that shows you your pattern of learned distress, your survival mechanism for dealing with it, and how Quanta Change tends to unfold for people with that pattern. So in order to get your pattern and your free report, you're going to go to my website, Quanta Change, Quanta change.com, and click on the free report button. So I hope you'll do that today and just find out what pattern of learned distress you have as a starting point. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that if you've had trust issues, you have a better understanding of where they're coming from and why there's been a pattern of mistrust in your life. And I hope that you will join me again next week to find out another way in which Quanta Change really can help you feel good being you. Thank you so much.